wake the boys, Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband, George Lambchop. Just then, their younger son Arthur called from the bedroom he shared with his brother Stanley. Hey, come on, look, hey! Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were both very much in favour of politeness and careful speech. Hay's for horses, Arthur, not people, Mr. Lambchop said as they entered the bedroom. Try to remember that. Excuse me, Arthur said, but look! He pointed to Stanley's bed. Across it lay the enormous bulletin board that Mr. Lambchop had given the boys a Christmas ago, so that they could pin up pictures and messages and maps. It had fallen, during the night, on top of Stanley. But Stanley was not hurt. In fact, he would still have been sleeping if he had not been woken by his brother's shout. What's going on here? He called out cheerfully from beneath the enormous board. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift it from the bed. Heavens, said Mrs. Lambchop. Gosh, said Arthur, Stanley's flat. As a pancake, said Mr. Lambchop. Darndest thing I've ever seen. Who are ya? Who are ya? Who's that behind the mask? Breakfast. Where's Papa going with that axe? Then said her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Out to the hog house, replied Mrs. Arable. Some pigs were born last night. Don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Do away with it? Shrieked Fern. You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig will probably die anyway. Fern pushed the chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you have to control yourself. Who are ya? Who are ya? Who's that behind the mask?
Jack's mother said, we're stony broke. Go out and find some wealthy bloke who'll buy our cow, just say she's sound, and worth at least £100. But don't you dare to let him know that she's as old as Billy O. Jack led the old brown cow away and came back later in the day and said, oh, Mumsy dear, guess what? Your clever little boy has got, I really don't know how, a super trade-in for our cow. The mother said, you little creep, I bet you sold her much too cheap. When Jack produced one lousy bean, his startled mother, turning green, leapt high up in the air and cried, I'm absolutely stupefied. You crazy boy, do you really mean you sold our Daisy for a bean?
Who are ya? Who are ya? Who's that behind the mask?
Ruby is a small girl with a huge imagination. She loves to crawl under her bed. Imagine all the bugs that might live there. She's always coming up with new dance moves, and her favourite word is why. In Ruby's world, she's the chief creator and architect. One day, she's a doctor. The next, a bug hunter. Her superpower? Ruby can build things with her imagination. Anything is possible if Ruby puts her mind to it. One thing Ruby doesn't like is to be told what to do. Sometimes this means trouble, especially if the instructions are unclear. When Ruby's dad asks her to get dressed for school, she puts on her dress and shoes, but keeps her polka dot pyjamas on. After all, Dad didn't tell her to first change out of her pyjamas.
Who are ya? Who are ya? Who's that behind the mask?
Once upon a time, in Spain, there was a little bull named Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived with would run and butt their heads together, but not Ferdinand. He liked to just sit quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favourite spot in the pasture under a cork tree. It was his favourite tree, and he would sit in the shade all day to smell the flowers. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls and skip and butt your head? She would say. But Ferdinand would shake his head. I like it better here, where I can just sit quietly and smell the flowers. His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was understanding, even though she was a cow, she would sit there and let him be happy.
Who are ya? Who are ya? Who's that behind the mask?
Archibald was sitting behind the teacher's table staring with a mixture of horror and fascination at the newt wriggling in the glass. Matilda's eyes were also riveted on the glass, and now, quite slowly, there began to creep over Matilda a most extraordinary and peculiar feeling. The feeling was mostly in the eyes. A kind of sense of electricity seemed to be gathering inside them. A sense of power was brewing in those eyes of hers. A feeling of strength was settling inside, deep inside her eyes. But there was also another feeling, which was something else altogether, and which she could not understand. It was like flashes of lightning. Little waves of lightning seemed to be flashing out of her eyes. Her eyeballs were beginning to get hot, as though vast energy was building up somewhere inside them. It was an amazing sensation. She kept her eyes steadily on the glass, and now the power was concentrating itself into one small part of each eye and growing stronger and stronger.